And so I'm really seeking an opportunity to be able to do the spiritual side and the mental health side and prepare for my PhD. And I've been praying a lot about it because this opportunity, I also would like it to be paid just to be able to sustain my living in Hawaii. Because as we know, it is not cheap to live out here. But yeah, so, if anybody, this is my short little plug, short little shout out to anybody. If you know anybody that's looking for somebody who's interested in brain health and the clinical side of social work and spirituality, let me know. So
God, please just come into this space. I've been struggling. I really need you right now. I really need you right now.
I heard from God. I heard from God.
God is always trying to communicate with us. It's about if we're willing to communicate back, we're willing to see the signs that He's trying to give to us.
Because I'm not competing with God. I'm not competing with God.
hello, everybody, and welcome to or welcome back to Sacred Sports Souls. This is not a regular episode. Actually, I think I'm just going to put it up as kind of a bonus episode. But to be completely transparent with you, it is my final assignment, my last assignment for before I graduate. As some of you may know, I am currently pursuing my master's degree in social work with a specialization in behavioral mental health, and I graduate. And when I'm filming this, it'll be about 2 weeks, which is crazy. And we're coming up on finals week, but for grad programs, typically there aren't like regular, final exams where it's a comprehensive exam, multiple choice, whatever. They're usually just projects, which I've loved about my graduate program. And so I think I'm just going to post a little snippet of what the requirements for the project are, but I'm doing it as a podcast because for those of you who have supported me through this podcasting journey, and for those of you who know me in person, and even if you don't, I feel like I owe it to you guys to kind of just tell you a little bit more about myself. And honestly, to answer that, what I call the dreaded question of what are you doing next, and what are your plans, and are you going to stay in Hawaii? And I feel like when you're in certain seasons of your life, that's just such a popular question, and it can be kind of like hard to answer if you haven't really thought about it, or you don't really know, or you're putting it in God's hands, which is my case. So long story short, I'm going to put the requirements somewhere for this assignment, and then I'm just going to do it like an interview style a little bit. So you guys will see the question, and I'm going to try to answer it to the best of my ability. And I'm also going to try to keep it concise because I know that I can get on some tangents. I'm working on slowing down. I'm trying to work on slowing my brain down. So yeah, I'm excited to have you guys along for this episode, and shout out to my professor. If you're watching this, shout out Darren, one of my favorite professors in the whole program. I could be biased because he makes a lot of sports references and he knows Wahine volleyball. And so I just appreciate all that you've done for me across the span of my education these last 2 years, or really in this last year, as we've talked more about behavioral mental health specifically. And then I also just want to shout out my cohort. Shout out to the people who were in the grind, who I'm just so happy and so excited to be able to celebrate this milestone with, because there are so many well-deserving people in this program with really good hearts who just want to make a difference and want to help people in the world. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. And so what social work really is, from my understanding and from what I've learned in this program, is more of this holistic idea of us as human beings, and that we're not only, like for psychology or, other medical fields are really brain focused or body focused. And I think that us as humans, we're way more complex than just, even if you have like a mental health diagnosis, you're more complex than just your clinical depression. And I think that social work really emphasizes how can you get people connected to resources within their community and empowering individuals to make a change in their own lives, therefore kind of fostering this environment of a healthy community. And I think what it does is it takes the responsibility off of a system, or off of, this one entity, to be responsible for these people's lives, when in reality, community has been how we as human beings have grown and been able to thrive all throughout history. And so I think social work is this idea of empowering individuals so that they can make a difference within their community on their own. And so another misconception that or one of actually misconceptions that we see in social work all the time is this idea that all social work is child welfare. And all social work is taking people's kids away, when I don't think that that's the case at all. And I think that any department or any business or any corporation can actually benefit from having a social worker because of their really holistic view of how systems operate. And so a second myth that I kind of want to just address really quick is this idea that you have to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist in order to do therapy with people or in order to work clinically, when in reality, there are so many other ways to get certifications to become a counselor. And LCSW is one of the primary ways as a social worker, which is a licensed clinical social worker, so that you're doing all of the same things a psychologist would do. It's just your degree is in social work and your focus is in social work and you're learning a lot of the same practices. But like I said, I believe it's a more holistic view of who we are as humans, maybe a little less sciency in a way. But it really is this way of empowering individuals. In general, you don't necessarily have to just be a psychologist or a psychiatrist in order to work with people in dealing with their mental health. So that's one of the biggest things that I wanted to address. And then, yeah. So moving into kind of how I decided on behavioral mental health. And one of the things that has been so crucial and amazing to see, like you guys know, if you watch this podcast, my faith has been a really big foundational piece of my life, especially in the last year. And I've found it's just interwoven its way into every single part of my life, which as a Christian, that's the purpose. You're supposed to, allow Jesus into all of these aspects. But it's one of the most amazing things to me has been being able to see how God has worked through my education, and how your work or your education doesn't have to be, and actually shouldn't be, separate from your spiritual life. And as today I got to hear Dr. Marcy Verduen speak. And for those of you who don't know her, which you probably don't, and that's okay, she's amazing. But she co-wrote a book with Pastor Keith Towers, who's also a part of our ENC church, and it's called Mental Health for Spiritual People. And I'm actually halfway through the book right now. I just got it yesterday. That's how quickly I've been trying to obtain this wonderful wisdom. But she really is the epitome of being able. She's a licensed psychiatrist, and she's been a psychiatrist, has her doctorates, whatever, all these things, all these amazing accolades. But the most impressive part about her is how she speaks about this holistic perspective of spiritual being and mental health, science and religion, and how these two things don't have to necessarily exist apart from one another. And like I'm saying, they shouldn't. We as human beings are relational, we're emotional, we're physical, we're mind, we're body, but we're also spirit. And I think when you can be addressing each of these different realms of our humanity, you're going to find that health and well-being is actually more easy to attain. And that honestly has been something that I've discovered, like I said, in this last year. And it's because I've been so deep in my faith, as well as pursuing my graduate degree at the same time. And so the question number one is, what is your reason for entering this specific specialization? And so social work, you had a couple options. You go through a generalist year, and how I did it was I was a full-time student. So I was a 2-year program. You go through your generalist year where you just learn all the basic things about social work, do a generalist year practicum. And then in your second year is your specialist year. And this is where you decide whether you want to do, I think it's behavioral mental health, child and family, gerontology, and health. And there might be another one that I'm missing, but I'm pretty sure those are the main specializations. And I was deciding between child and family and behavioral mental health, but I ultimately decided on the mental health specialization because I really believe that mental health encompasses everything. Mental health is health. And so if I wanted to work with children and family, which I really have a heart for that as well, I can always go do that from a mental health capacity. And so that was kind of a big reason in terms of how I decided. But I've also just, as a student athlete, seen the growing necessity for mental health and mental health resources and talking about it and acknowledging it, because so often you see that student athletes just don't have the necessary coping skills to deal with some of the pressures that come with being especially a high level student athlete. And so the second part of this first section is why or what area of practice do I plan on pursuing? And this is something that I've gone back and forth with, especially as I'm considering applying to some PhD programs, which I'll get into a little bit later. But I really, really have a heart for working with sports, like with athletes, like I just said, but in the capacity of like sports social work, sports psychology, performance psychology as a whole. So performance psychology or performance consulting can really have to deal with anything where there's, this amount of pressure to perform and having to have the necessary skills to deal with those stressors. And so that could be from music to acting to the military. You see that performance consulting a lot in the military as well. And so I want to be able to have this background where I'm speaking to the pressures of performance. And so how that comes up, because I'm a student athlete and because my whole life has been about athletics, that'll likely push me into the realm of sports psych or sports social work. But I'm really open to learning about anything performance based, because I think that even if you're not an athlete, or even if you're not doing these high levels of performance, you still in your everyday are having to show up and perform in some capacity. And so I think when I'm learning about mental health in terms of performance, it's helpful for anybody. And on the second note of that, the second part of that is I've been so interested in integrating my spiritual life with the science and with the education that I'm learning with the mental health piece, because like I said, I believe we're holistic beings. And so as much as and as best as I can figure out how to do those things, about how to really try to vouch for this message that it doesn't have to just be science, or it doesn't have to just be religion. You can have both. So that's kind of if I had to summarize that area of practice, I want to do sports psychology, performance social work, sports social work, but also figuring out how to integrate that into spiritual practice. So section number 2 of the assignment is talking about my basic beliefs about mental health practice and social work, my current philosophies, and then my values regarding mental health practice. And this is something that I really had to sit down and think about, because like I said, guys, I had no idea what social work even was, because it is, even in my first year, I was trying to grasp for straws, figuring out, okay, is this social work? Is this social work? Because it is so broad. Like in general, you're just talking about how can you help people better their lives. And that's so general. And that's in so many different ways. And so as I was trying to figure out what social work was, I had to really sit and reflect. And so there are a couple, I think I have like 5 points here that I may or may not get to them all, but things that I believe about mental health practice and social work. And the first is that every single field can use a social worker. And I alluded to that a little bit in the beginning, but every person deals with mental health, no matter what sector of work, no matter what you pursue in life, you're gonna have to deal with mental health issues, because mental health is health. Our brain issues are us issues, you know what I mean? And so I think that what social work does is it really emphasizes that no matter what environment you're in, you can benefit from having a social worker, because also part of social workers' jobs is to get you connected to resources that can maybe help you deal with everyday life stressors, which we all face. The second thing is that I believe social workers can be a bridge to help better integrate mental health services. And I also believe this about the church. And so these are two things that I'm really trying to reconcile and figure out, which is, like I said, amazing to see, like your Dr. Marcy's and your Dr. Anita's, and you guys might not know who I'm talking about, Dr. Tama's, like you guys might not know who I'm talking about, but these are women in this religious realm and spiritual realm that are also doctors, that have also pursued these degrees in mental health, and it really just goes to show that there can be a bridge. And so when we're talking about bridging, a lot of the issues that you see in mental health right now in mental health systems is there's a lack of integration. And what I mean by that is, you say somebody's having a really hard time they have a severe mental health issue. And so you send them to the hospital, and they go to the hospital and they get the help they need, but then the hospital refers them here, and then they don't know how to necessarily deal with this. So they refer them there. And a lot of people can get lost between I don't know what the exact verbiage I'm looking for, but lost between the cracks, I guess. And typically these people are your marginalized, black, brown people of color. Like that's typically who's falling between the cracks of these systems. And then also having potentially their trauma, um, just what is it? You're having their trauma resurface because of their issues in within these systems and racism and sexism and all of these different things that kind of contribute to how our systems have been built. I believe that social work can be a solution in getting people directly connected to the service that they desperately need. And so my third point here is everything in social work is about the client. It's about empowering people. And I believe that you can teach somebody to, I mean, you can bring somebody fish, whatever that analogy is. But when you teach a man to fish, you're then empowering him to be able to go out and seek food on his own. Now, Jesus was just doing miracles, and that's a whole different, realm. But there's definitely some biblical wisdom on empowering the individual and knowing that within you, you have the power to, when with the right support, with the right help, with the right, medication in some senses, like you have what it takes to be able to build resilience so that you can live a healthy, fulfilling life without necessarily having to see a therapist all the time. But this is obviously really dependent on the situation. And this is not like a one size fits all type of deal. But I do believe empowerment is and strength based is the direction it needs to move in. And so the next point that I wanted to make is that trauma informed care, which is kind of this new age idea, are basically just around people who are helping those who have experienced severe trauma or hardship should know how to not make it worse. You should know how to not make it worse. You should know how to navigate these things. And this kind of goes back to the last point of empowerment in that, you're trying to elicit the solution or the healing process out of the person. You're not trying to put it onto them, if that makes sense. And so trauma informed care is essentially just understanding how to navigate people's traumas in a healthy manner. And the last thing that I love about social work and that I've kind of these beliefs that I have around mental health in social work is that there's this emphasis on the care of the practitioner, of prioritizing self-care as the practitioner, because you're going to see and you're going to experience a lot of adverse situations. And, the last thing you want is to be taking on the traumas of the people that you're trying to see, because then you're not helping them to the best of your ability. And so this is just like what you see in athletics is, if you're not taking care of yourself outside of the court, then you're not going to show up the best when you go to play on the court. And so this is kind of the same idea as like, how are you taking care of yourself outside of work and how are you prioritizing your mental health? And I love how this coincides with my spiritual and religious beliefs, because that is what recharges me. That is what my foundation is set on. And I think when you have more of a solid foundation in this guide of just naturally living your life, and when rest is built into that foundation, which it is in Christianity, you are going to be so much better off so that you're not overworking yourself, so you're not getting burnt out, so you're not experiencing this emotional taxation all the time. You know how to separate the things because you have a solid foundation in your spiritual life outside of work. And so those are kind of my general beliefs about mental health and social work practice, and some of the values that I hold when it comes to the implication and implementation of these practices. So segment 3 here is about social problems or issues in behavioral mental health that I'm concerned about, the setting I like to practice, and then what I hope to accomplish. And so I've kind of touched on that a little, so this won't be super, super long, but I think, one of the biggest issues is the access to resources and the help seeking behaviors in the realm of athletics. And I can speak for college athletics because I've been a college athlete, but just in general, I think these are, when you're talking about mental health, you can also be integrating these practices and things as young as, when people start picking up the volleyball for the first time. Or I think these are things that practices and behaviors that should be taught at an early age, so that as you grow up and your situations become more stressful, the pressure gets a little bit higher and it starts to raise, you have the coping skills to then deal with external pressures and things that you face as student athletes. And so that's a really big behavioral mental health problem that I'm focused on and concerned about, but that also can expand to I have a really specific research interest in male athletes and the kind of pervasive violent behaviors in specific sports and how that has to do with mental health. And that's really vague because I'm still trying to flush that out. But I just think that, men in general aren't necessarily always taught the skills or given the space to express their emotions and their feelings and their thoughts outwardly. And you can see the repercussions of that in their behaviors a lot of times in college, because of a lot of different compounding factors. But that's really interesting to me, is how do we uh, mitigate the just effects of not only the college athletics, but also just being a man and being a man in sport. And I think that this also shows a lot in spiritual practice and in my faith, man. One of the most encouraging things that I see is men getting into small groups and talking about the things that they're feeling and being offered the safe space to just cry or to be angry or to talk about some of the stuff that society doesn't necessarily accept as willingly. And so I'm hoping to create a space like that for all athletes, but especially male athletes. And then in terms of the setting in which I hope to practice, I really am interested in groups, group dynamics, teams, in doing maybe clinical work with teams. I believe that we are not who we are without the people we surround ourselves with. So that's why working in groups I love, because it really is, you're talking about group dynamics, you're talking about how we're constantly influencing one another. And so I hope to work in that space. I also, have a newfound love and respect for research in social work practice. And so I'm hoping to, that's why part of the reason I'm hoping to pursue my PhD is so that I can be in that realm of really trying to understand the human condition and in a way that's trackable or traceable, and it can be put into quantitative and qualitative data. And this is like the very nerdy whatever side, but I'm really interested in research, and so I'm hoping to pursue that. And then in terms of what I hope to accomplish, my mission and hope for outcomes, I hope that no matter the level an athlete is at, whether that's professional, whether that's junior college, whether that's high school, whether that's church league, I'm my hopes are that sport can be a vehicle to enhance uh your life essentially and your well-being. I don't think it should harm it or, make the burden heavier. I think it should be a way of enhancing these life lessons and these God-given talents and abilities that we've been given. And it should be enjoyable. You should find joy in your sport. You should find fulfillment, like true fulfillment, not in your sport, but through the act of your sport. And this is another way that I think faith plays a huge part in it, is knowing that your sport's not your purpose. And so my goal and my hope for outcome, I know this is not, extremely tangible in a sense, but my hope is that student athletes can understand that you are not your sport, your purpose is not your sport, and that your identity is in something much higher and greater, and your sport is just a way to glorify God. And so that's my hope for the future of athletics. So this next section, what areas in coursework have significantly contributed to my knowledge base, the evaluation of my field work, how it's contributed, what other experience has contributed to my learning, and then kind of what is my satisfaction with my learning experience. And so I think I have written down here that I don't even need to look at it. Some of my favorite courses that I've taken thus far, and I'm a nerd, so I really like to learn. And so a lot of the classes in my master's and graduate program have been amazing and I've learned so much. But some of my favorites have been marriage and family therapy. I took a marriage and family therapy course actually before I was in the program, but it counted as my electives. I took an intro to the DSM, human behavior in the social environment, and then obviously my social work practice and mental health. And so I say all these courses because one, they were really interesting to me. There are things that I had already inherently been interested in. And as I've kind of gone about it, I've understood why they've been more interesting to me, because they give me an introspection to who I am. But also the second thing is I really like the professors that taught those courses, but I could also see how they apply to just the general population and some of the things that we are as humans searching for. So like through my faith, I believe that we are relational beings and that everything we do, good or bad, is in this effort to seek community and seek relation. And so the marriage and family therapy addresses that. The human uh, behavior and social environment addresses that. The mental health course, actually, all of the courses essentially address these different aspects of humanity, which you can see come together in the church and in my faith. And so that has been one of the best things, is seeing God reconcile those two things and show me, like, hey, the principles and things that you're learning in your classes are not just academic principles. They're biblical, they're spiritual, and they're essential to who we are as human beings and how we grow, or how our growth is stunted in certain areas. And so you see over and over again in these classes, in this coursework, how we are holistic beings and how we're not just one element. And so to say that we're just our brains and that we're just psychology is to do an injustice and disservice to actually who we are, and can actually be problematic in how we're going about treatment and things like that. And so my field work, actually, so field work practicum is a big part of social work practice, a little bit controversial because we don't get paid to do it, in which, yeah, you go back and forth about, it's an educational internship, but whatever. I think that social workers should for sure be paid for their practicum sites, and that organization should pay social workers more because of how valuable the work actually is. And I think, the future of social work will hopefully, people will be able to see the value in it more, and we will be compensated more for our work. But until then, we gonna grind. Just know that there will always be people who have a heart for that. But to answer the question, I did my field site or my practicum last summer. Typically you do it alongside of your coursework throughout the semester, but I have to defer mine to the summer because I was a college athlete. And so typically it's a whole summer thing, and you're working about 35 hours a week for free if you don't have an employment-based site. So last summer, I worked for the Department of Education, the Hawaii Department of Education, education, homeless children and youth program. And man, it was a great experience. I learned a lot. It was my generalist year, so I was kind of seeing how social work works in different capacities, and it was more of an administrative, community outreach type of deal. So I really got to drive around the island and go to these different shelters and just see one of the realms of social work that I would have never thought about, but is super prevalent in the state of Hawaii, and that is the houseless population and the unstable housing situations of families and the children in those families and their access to education and all these things. So it was a super uh, helpful time, a helpful experience, because even though I don't necessarily want to work in that realm of administration, it gave me a better idea of what social work is and how we can contribute to the greater good. And then also what the heart is for other social workers and other people in this field, and what they are going to do. Because like I said, I shouted out my cohort at the beginning, we're all going to be doing such different things when we go into the workforce. But I know that it's all from a good place, and we're all trying to inspire change in the different realms that we're in. And you could say the same thing about the body of Christ. You could say the same thing. The Bible talks all about, the different parts of the body having different functions. And I 100% believe social work is a reflection of that. And so I think that that's what my field site contributed to me, or that experience contributed to me last year, was just seeing the different bodies of social work. And I'm actually deferring like I said, my specialist year. So I'm walking this May, but I won't technically be graduated until the end of the summer when I complete my field work. And this summer is meant to be a specialist year. And so I'm really seeking an opportunity to be able to do the spiritual side and the mental health side and prepare for my PhD. And I've been praying a lot about it because this opportunity, I also would like it to be paid just to be able to sustain my living in Hawaii. Because as we know, it is not cheap to live out here. But yeah, so, if anybody, this is my short little plug, short little shout out to anybody. If you know anybody that's looking for somebody who's interested in brain health and the clinical side of social work and spirituality, let me know. So in terms of the other experiences that have contributed to my learning, athletics, let me tell you, sport has been one of the, if not the biggest contributor to the things that I'm learning and how I'm going to apply them. And the more that I, since I've been done being a student athlete, I've been in this realm of, okay, now I have to go find a real job and do these like real adult things. And it's been cool to see how people value my experience as a student athlete, because they recognize kind of the resilience it takes, the hard work and commitment, the work ethic, the ability to be able to work in a team, and all these different intangible skills that you gain being a student athlete, especially at a Division I level. People have been able to see my value, even though I don't have the most work experience. I don't have this, I don't have that, but it's like, okay, we can take you on that experience alone. And I have just so much, I'm so grateful for my experience as a student athlete, and I could go on for hours literally about how sport has taught me everything I know. But I think that that has been another big contributor in how I'm applying my social work and behavioral mental health and all these different things. So the last question, what's my satisfaction? I'll answer really briefly. It's been great. I've loved it. I definitely have some qualms with some of the aspects of the social work system in general, but honestly, I can't complain. One of the most amazing parts about being in the social work program here at the University of Hawaii specifically is the emphasis on cultural humility and cultural practice. And I think that that is something that you do not gain in a lot of other institutions. But because I'm in Hawaii, which is being in an indigenous land, recognizing the land in which this belongs to, the people to which this land belongs to. There we go. And just the cultural practices and how people are super. This Hawaii is so unique, and how community means so much, and that's getting lost a little bit. Real life communities getting lost in our generation because you have online communities, you have all these different things, but there is definitely something really special and biblical about having real life connections, and Hawaii is the epitome of that. So that's been amazing. So my satisfaction in general, if I had to rank out of 10, 8 out of 10. So this segment, we've come to it, the dreaded, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? And I say dreaded because I am not a person that lives in the future. It is quite literally one of the hardest things for me is to think even a month ahead. A month is like stretching. I get real stressed. I get a lot of anxiety. But I've been trying to be better about that, because I know that there's kind of a difference between worrying about your future and knowing what's secured uh in your future because of the grace and love of God. And so here I go again, tying back in my faith into this, but I can't answer this question without saying that my faith, or my plan for the next 3 to 5 years, is not my plan. I'm going with seeking God's kingdom first, and wherever he leads me, that's where I'll go. So right now it's been put on my heart to pursue a PhD in whatever it might look like: counseling, psych, clinical psych, social work. The actual name of the degree and the title of the degree is not actually as important as what I'll be doing, which is contributing through research to the body of knowledge around mental health and sport, around sports social work, around how spirituality ties in with mental health, around all these different areas. And so wherever I can go, that I can do that work and continue to pursue Christ to my fullest, that's where I'll be in 3 to 5 years. And so I'm hoping that's a doctoral program. I don't know where exactly, like what state or whatever, but I'm still in the process of figuring that out. My plan in terms of acquiring new competencies and continuing education, PhD is continuing education, but acquiring new competencies, I'm really hoping, like I said, to integrate ministry or my faith into what I want to do for work. And so I think that that is my answer to how I'll be acquiring new knowledge and new skill sets, is just by pursuing Christ, just by being involved in the church, just by serving. And I believe that God will reveal the things to me that I need to learn, because he's never let me down before. So don't know why he would now. And everything that I know is directly from God. So, that's where I'm putting my plans, putting my faith. And so in terms of plans for self-care, I already answered that too. And that's about building into my faith. And I'm actually the worst with self-care. I'm a type of person who wants to be productive, who's constantly going, who's putting things on my plate. And I can honestly say the reason that I'm not doing that now, the reason I can experience peace and rest, like true peace and rest, is because I have Jesus in my life. And yeah, I we talked about, or Dr. Marcy talked about Sabbath today and Sabbath rest, and integrating this idea of just taking your foot off the gas, like, and having the, because when your foot's on the gas, you're going, man. And when my foot's on the gas, I'm going straight. I don't see nothing. I'm in a rush. I'm in a hurry. But when I take the time to rest and to Sabbath, it's like I'm taking my foot off the gas, and I finally have the time and energy to look around and see that all the things that God is doing in my life. And so when you give yourself, when you give yourself that space to rest and that space to rejuvenate your spirit, man, I don't even know, I'm going to be able to conquer the world literally when I do that. And so I'm really in a space of trying to slow down, trying to be in silence, trying to limit my distractions more. And these are all spiritual disciplines and practices or formations that I've learned in the last maybe 2 weeks. And I have to shout this out. If you follow Sacred Sports Souls on Instagram, you may have seen me shout this podcast out, but I think it's called Fight, Hustle, and Hurry. I'm gonna hopefully put a little like image of what the podcast is, but you guys just have to go listen to it. It is, they discuss the pervasiveness of hustle and hurry and grind culture in our world today. And it just has changed my life in the sense that I value silence. I value peace. I value rest more than I value being productive. And I think that's the space that Christ allows you to get to, is that you don't need to always be going in this state of worry, in this state of anxiety, in this state of, am I living up to my expectations? Am I where I need to be? Because the only place, listen to me closely, people. The only place you need to be is right here, right now. And I will take it a step further in saying that the only place you need to be is right here, right now, because that is where God is. That is where Jesus is. That is where the Holy Spirit is. And that is where your most spiritual self dwells, is in this present moment. And so when you're elsewhere, when you're distracted, when you're mindlessly scrolling on TikTok, trying to distract yourself, or, and I'm not judging you, I'm just saying, like, I've been there, and it's not as fulfilling as being bored. It's okay to be bored, and I'm not the best at it. I try to distract myself, but I'm really encouraging you all to slow down. It's okay to slow down. So yeah, that's my plan for self-care. Reading my Bible, doing things that I like to do, hobbies. But yeah. So as I come to a close here, I'm looking back and I'm thinking, oh man, hopefully I wasn't just rambling the whole time, because that is how I get when, like I said, I don't slow down. But some of my concluding thoughts around just how has my educational experience prepared me for my profession within my specialization. And it's like beating a dead horse because I've been talking about it the whole time. But man, this graduate program, this experience of higher education, I guess I'll start with the fact that being a part of a cohort of different ages, different backgrounds, different genders, ethnicities, all those things, has really built me and grown me in seeing other perspectives. And social work is extremely collaborative. It is interdisciplinary. It is, you're constantly having to work with other people who are experts in their professions. And I think that that's another part of social work, is how do you connect all of these experts in their own fields? And so I think that that experience within itself, along with sports, along with the actual acquisition of knowledge and learning, has prepared me to take on the world, along with my spiritual beliefs and my religious beliefs. And it has just prepared me to truly make a difference. My whole life, I've always been so sensitive to the emotions and to the feelings of others. Like, one of the examples of this is, I remember there's this kid in my high school who I had Spanish class with. Didn't really talk to him, didn't really know him. And he actually ended up committing suicide. He was 15, I believe, at the time. And I was so heartbroken, so heartbroken. And I remember going to my mom, and this was like the first really run-in I had with death, and especially death in that manner. And I remember just telling her I couldn't understand why things like that happened. I've always been so sensitive. Like, even watching a video online, guys, I'm the type of person who takes on that emotional weight because I can just, while I can't exactly imagine what's going on, I put myself in people's shoes so often. Me and Elijah make a joke. I like live in other people's shoes. And yes, that could be exhausting sometimes, but I've also come to understand that it's a superpower that God gave me. And so I'm hoping that I can use these gifts that God gave me, in, you know, my gifts in sport, and my gifts in speaking, and my gifts in podcasting, and my gifts in ministry, and all these different gifts that the Lord has given me. And I can utilize them to promote goodness and to promote the things that Jesus would promote in this world, which is, you know, joy and self-control and fulfillment, satisfaction in eternal life, and just these things that I know in our human nature we're so desperately seeking. We just don't know how a lot of the time. So I'm also hoping to use my gift in teaching and all these different things to just help some people out. So if I can do that, if this podcast has done that, if this me talking about what I'm going to do in the future encourages anybody in any way, I'd hope that that's the case. And I really just want to inspire hope in people. And I want you all to know that there is hope. Man, there is hope in Jesus. There is hope in Jesus. And I can't say that enough. And I'm learning to get over what that might sound like to people who don't know Jesus yet, because I can't blame nobody for what they don't know. All I can do is encourage you. This is not nonsense I'm talking. I promise you that. This is not nonsense. And if you ever have any questions, if you ever want to just chat and talk, man, I'm here for that. And I don't know how this turned into that. This is literally my final exam. Like, I'm just talking about Jesus at the end, but yeah, I want to encourage community, encourage having these conversations. Ask the Christian that you know and trust about Jesus, and just be really inquisitive about spirituality, and maybe even how that can be integrated into your life and integrated into science. And so if I have to leave you guys with anything, it's that science and spirituality don't have to exist apart from one another. You can be logical and spiritual. You can be religious and logical. You can be religious and a doctor. If that doesn't carry weight, I don't know what does. So I just thank you guys for, if you've been tagging along with this podcast, I thank you. If you're just tuning in because this is my final exam, I thank you too. And I hope to have more videos and more spaces where I can talk more openly just about me and what I believe. And so I love you guys. Jesus loves you more. And I will see you when I see you. Peace.